All right, so I got to ask this question as I'm sitting down here in Kabukicho, which is actually a good place for this question that I got asked. And it was like, do you think Japan still has the gentle sadness that you've talked about in other videos in the past? And for sure, of course I do. I think it just depends on the perspective that you're like looking at something at the time, or the tint of the glasses you're looking at, or the tint of the glasses you're looking through. Like they have that phrase, rose tinted glasses, all that kind of thing. So it just depends on how you're looking at it. But there still is definitely a innocence to Japan, you know? And I was thinking about this recently because, I was actually walking down and there's these girls and they gave me they're like sitting down and they gave me I don't know, it's like the lamb to slaughter look, basically. This like innocence sort of look. And it reminds me of this look that I also got. I was coming back on, if you remember I told the story, I was coming back home on a train one day and there was this girl. And she was like staring at me so bad the whole time. And you know how when a girl like wants you, sometimes they got like the Bambi eyes, the Twitter eyes, right? The Twitter pated eyes. They start to like blush, almost start to cry. When you know a girl wants you, like badly, like, they start blushing, the tears start coming, right? She like literally was like having a moment on the train while looking at me. And, I'm much taller than her. And you could see like the innocence in her eyes, like, she kept on trying to she kept literally doing this with her hand, like wanting to reach up to grab my hand here, which was like hanging on to the thing, right? And it was like the wildest thing for like, I don't remember how many stops it was. And eventually, I just looked at her the whole time. And eventually she like, at her stop, she just looked back at me and she's like, thank you so much. Like I had like made her like, I don't know what, she had a moment just on the train by looking at me. Like it was such like a raw kind of fucking desire, but also in that there's like an innocence in there. And a roundabout way of saying this is, if you think about a place like Kabukicho, Shinjuku, or whatever it is, or you got to remember when people say, oh, I'm going to Japan and I'm going to Tokyo, Tokyo is huge. Shinjuku is part of Tokyo. Shibuya, Harajuku, Akihabara, you know what I mean? All these different cities, Inagi, wherever it is, that's all technically, Tokyo, right? But say if I'm in a place like Inagi, right, that is a very sort of like, innocent sort of vibe, right? Like I said before, if you ever get to go to Japan and you don't just go to all these sort of like cliche sort of like touristy spots of Japan and you just go to the suburbs, Japan in the suburbs is, very innocent. It's like something out of a movie. Very, childlike, almost innocence, like something you would see out of a movie, like parents holding their hands, like skipping along, that kind of thing, right? Like there's really sort of a big contrast of, coming to the city and then you take the train home and you go back to that gentle sort of life. Go to the city to work, just like that's why I say like the sex culture is so interesting to me in Japan, because again, I don't necessarily consider Japanese people nice, but they're very generally non-malicious, right? And so you think there's this sort of like non-malicious sort of view of sexual relations between people. Like, oh, my husband might come to the city, Kabukicho, wherever it's Shinjuku, wherever I might go to the escort thing, he's probably going to have sex, but as long as we don't talk about it, as long as when we go back home we're together, it's okay. Right? Like sex is just viewed as like whatever. Sometimes people have needs. And when I've talked to like Japanese like husbands and everything like that too, they've even said that, technically the wife is, quotation marks, allowed to have sex with other people too. Now, do they? Again, from what I understand and what I've lived in Japan, probably not, because a lot of people don't actually talk to each other in Japan. A lot of people just stay to themselves, right? But when I think about this like gentle innocence, right, you even think about that, like think about that from a certain perspective. It's like, wow, sex is, we don't talk about sex at home, but everyone knows at night, maybe after work, if we go to the city, we'll probably be having sex, right? That's where you go to do these things that you can't do in real life, because it's almost like it's allowed, right? this is your fun time, right? And there's a lot of like sort of like, you could say legal gray area in Japan, because again, Japan sort of feels like, as long as there is not malicious intent, you know what I mean, you can sort of do whatever almost. And because most people are not actually malicious in Japan, although again, the caveat is, I don't think that a lot of people actually care about each other, either, despite the omoiyari and gaman, because they kind of like collide. But, generally speaking, you just see that sort of innocence, right? You're like, man, this person, this mundane, innocent, childlike life at home, out of like a fairy tale, and then they go home to get out their vices, or they come to the city to get out their vices, just like, I mean, even when you think of, the innocence of, I'm sure, if you've ever been to Japan, when you say how old you are to drink, like I don't drink, right? But, I've definitely see, probably people that are younger than the drinking age, you know what I mean, in Japan. And they just go, oh, I'll just say that I'm older. And, no one bats an eye, because it's kind of like, it's the city. It's like a childlike innocence, like a gentle sadness that this person has. This is the only chance that this person has to actually be free. Just like when you think about like the Peter Pan syndrome of Japan, that, you know what I mean? Once you get out of high school, a lot of times you go to working all the time. You know what I mean? That chance of you having a life is now over. Like your chance of living, despite the fact that, there's more rules, let's say, when you're younger, despite there's these rules, that's also the biggest time for you to break the rules, to actually experience your childlike innocence of exploring new things, right? Because maybe when you get older, you might not even have as much opportunity because you might be working as much. And then, you know what, then a place like, Shinjuku, Kabukicho, whatever it might be, it really literally might only be for sex. The husband or maybe the wife is cheating on somebody, whatever it might be, right? So again, I guess it depends on how you look at things. For sure, again, I don't feel, and I've said this before, I don't feel this from any place in the world, really, that people actually care about you. Caring about someone is always seemingly a convenience, you know what I mean, more often than not. But again, there's non-maliciousness, and you can still see the childlike innocence in Japanese people, I think. That sort of gentle sadness that, I got to work so hard. And, just think about the omoiyari and gaman, just the gaman culture. You know what I mean? When you think about that gentle sadness of not being able to express your feelings, you know what I mean? Because, again, when I talk about the omoiyari and the gaman culture, so gaman is to endure, right? And then the omoiyari is the consideration of others. And that's why, so I'm gamaning, let's say, you know what I mean? I have to endure because we all have to work hard. It's such a, cave, sort of like a, we're all in this together kind of thing. We all have to go through the same thing. So we're all enduring this bad thing. But since you always assume the other person is going through something bad too, it's like not accepted to actually talk about how you feel a lot of times, right? And that's a gentle sadness, I think, if you just think about that from a perspective, right? And so then you think, hey, I'm in the city. I don't actually get to feel a lot of times or express how I feel maybe. Now I'm in the city. This is where I get to express. I get to have fun. The one chance. Then you take that slow train ride home that everybody does, that slow, gentle sadness of going back home to the mundane, innocent sort of life, right? So yeah, I still see the innocent side of Japan, the gentle sadness. Like I said, I just saw when I was walking down, those girls were, they looked like a lamb to slaughter. You know what I mean? Literally, when they give you those like fucking Bambi, I was like, oh my God, like who is this person? Give me an experience because I know I'm going to be coming back home, whatever. And like I said, that one train ride home was, that was such a good example of it, really. You know what I mean? But anyway, man, if you like the videos, like, sub, silly comment, share, support the channel if you want. I appreciate it. Thanks. The end.